Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Careers Podcast. In today's episode, we're taking a deep dive into the NDIS sector and looking at what good actually looks like for professionals wanting to work in this space. Today, I'm joined by Gina Ingrouille from Effective Policy, who's going to be sharing her wealth of experience in this space with us. So, thank you for joining me, Gina. How are you today?
Well, thanks, Tom. How are you? And thanks for having me.
I'm great. I'm actually bloody hot. It is so hot in Queensland at the moment. So, aircon's on, fans are on, and here we are. We're ready to chat.
Ready to rock and roll. Okay.
So to begin, you're a professional operating in the NDIS space, providing awesome tools to make compliance less complex for NDIS providers. Before we dive into all of that, though, I just wanted to get a little bit more about your background and where your career started and how you ended up here in the NDIS space.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. All right. So it was an unusual place to end up. You're absolutely right. So I started in the oral health field. As a sort of 20-year-old, I was a mature age student at tertiary college because I got a job as a dental assistant as a young person, and it just all made perfect sense to me. Don't ask me why, but it just gave me joy. I don't know. And then I thought, well, gosh, what else is out there? And I looked around for this New South Wales or actually Australian Commission for Health course, and it was called a dental therapist, and they were the people who would look after children's teeth in the school system. So I did that, and that was good fun. And then I had children, and life goes on, and then I just had a big life change of my own. So there was no plan to leave that career. But then, a few things happened from a health perspective in my own life. And when I came through that, I just felt like that didn't have a lot of meaning for me. So I didn't know what to do with myself. And I sat myself, someone said, "What are you doing today?" And I said, "Nothing." And they said, "Come to TAFE. I'm going to TAFE." I went, "All right, I'll come to TAFE." Well, that was it. I had a uni degree, but I went along to TAFE because I couldn't think of anything better to do. Right. And I thought, oh my God, I love this. I love this stuff. They're talking about community services and disadvantaged and all of these things. And as a girl from the northern beaches of Sydney, I didn't really know a lot about disadvantage. And I certainly didn't go over the harbour, the Spit Bridge to Sydney very often. And I didn't know my way around Sydney City. So it was just so new and it felt so meaningful. So I started working. Soon after I started TAFE, I grabbed a job within 6 weeks in a nursing home, making a quarter of what I would have made as a dental therapist. But I never felt like I contributed more to society and that feeling of filling up. Instead of the job ripping you down, the job was filling me up. Yeah. And
That's amazing.
I went from there, went on to do more study, went into homelessness. And I really say to people who want to work in any kind of the helping sectors or social sciences, the best education I ever got was from a homelessness refuge, because that's ground zero. That's absolutely ground zero. And from there, I went into case management and, all the way up the chain to CEO of a not-for-profit. And from there, I thought, where the hell does this money come from? Like, I'm spending all this money, but where's it coming from? And I eventually got myself a job as a policy analyst with government to figure out what they were doing, how we were getting the money, who were these people telling us what we could spend and what we couldn't, who develops these programs, who makes that dumb decision or that good decision. And at the same time, I started quality auditing as well, because I had to learn how to run these drug and alcohol units or mental health services under a set of compliance and quality standards. And really, that's 25 years ago now. But that's where I started and where I went to, and I've never looked back. So
That's actually amazing. I wanted to ask as well, when you went to TAFE, what was the course that was put in front of you and you studied first? Like, what was the foot in the door?
it was the community services diploma. And I thought, I have no idea what they're talking about. I just used to, when my mother sent me to TAFE, and when I left school, because I didn't want to do my HSC, when my mother sent me to TAFE, she made me go and do secretarial, and I got booted out within 6 months anyway. They just I couldn't sit still for a minute. But I used to see these signs in the Seaforth TAFE that would say community services, community welfare, and I thought, what is that? I didn't know what it meant. And then, of course, like 25 years later, I was sitting in that. And now I know what this means now. Now I know.
With the homelessness stuff, can you just describe some of the things that you saw there and things that really impacted you? Because that obviously sounds like a really big pivot point where you've gone, oh my
It
God,
was.
this is intense.
Yeah, so most people would consider working in the homelessness sector like just your entry point. And it can be because, oh, well, we'll hire anyone. That they hired a person who didn't have any experience like me.
Mm,
But it's the ground zero. And that's what I realized because, even though I was new at community work, I still had a degree. I still had a health science degree and I was an adult at the time, 33. And what I could see was this is where you end up. This is what happens through no fault of anybody's if you have a severe mental illness that is persistent and can't be managed or, I could see how people lose their homes. I could see how people lose their minds. And I could see what happens to people if they're unwell and they can't find the help they need. Or I also want to say, if they're unwell and can't be fixed, not everything can be fixed. And not everything is the fault of the government.
yeah.
But that's the end of the line. Yeah. And so from a starting point, it's where I saw alcohol related brain damage.
Hmm.
And as I said, I got my first job before that was in a aged care unit for 2 years while I was studying, and I saw dementia. And I knew a bit about alcohol related brain damage. I saw the dementia, I saw the alcohol related brain damage, and I was fascinated by
Yeah.
what was happening to people. And, if I could shake everyone and say, do you have any idea what you're doing when you black out when you're drinking alcohol? Because, mate, you are destroying your brain cells and this is on offer for all of you,
Mm.
and it just, yeah, it really was. I always say anyone who's worked in homelessness for any length of time, you will have a really good idea of all the behaviours that we see in disability or aged care or mental health. You can really see where everything's stemmed from and where it can go if there are no interventions in place or there's no help.
Which really speaks to the heart of this whole thing and why the NDIS was created. So, just to set the scene a little bit, this question's just for people that are looking at getting into this space. So they're young, Gina. They're going, "What is this community services thing?" Can we just set the scene for what the NDIS actually is as a
Okay.
scheme and who it's designed to serve?
And just for context, so I would never have considered, even once I got through, probably when I got to the point of, CEOing a drug and alcohol rehabilitation organization or a mental health, I would never have thought I work in disability. But what I could see is, hey, these are all cross sections. In homelessness, you've got disability. In the mental health units, you've got disability. In drug and alcohol, you've got disability. In aged care, you've got disability. These are not standalone. Disability is not standalone. It
Hmm.
cross sections with so many other parts of life. Okay. So at the end of the day, I could confidently say, yeah, I work in disability because I have worked with all of these different cohorts of people. So that was a learning thing as well. So having said that, for you to understand the NDIS, I need to take you back. And I think that the saddest part of, and I do say sad, and I'll qualify that later, the saddest part of the NDIS having rolled out in about 2012, I lose track of the year, but it's either 2011 or 2012 or 2013, but I think it's 12. The saddest part is that now we have a generation of people um, who don't know anything but the NDIS. And that's sad because the NDIS is far from adequate and far from being fit for purpose. So before the NDIS, when I did go in to do, I think I did like 3.5 years in policy and operations for the head office of Ageing, Disability and Home Care for New South Wales. So starting with that, NDIS is a Commonwealth product. So it's all of Australia. Before that, every state looked after their disabilities. So the Commonwealth funded each state via tenders to find, that NGOs, not-for-profits, etc., would be given certain amounts of money to take care of our disability sector. Additionally, every single state also did run their own service. So we had government-run services and we had not-for-profit run services. And that's really important factor that I want to point out here is they were not for profit. Everything was not for profit. Government was not for profit. All of the tendered services were not for profit. And
Okay.
I'm never going to say that that was perfect, but this is the sector, the not-for-profit and the government-run business services that would be responsible for caring for, working with people with a disability. So what is a disability? Some people say, oh, it's just something physical, or no, it can be physical and mental, or no, it's much simpler than that. To have a disability, there's an impairment, and it doesn't matter where the impairment comes from. So don't worry about physical or mental, or what's the impairment?
Yes.
What are you no longer able to do that everybody else could do, or you could do before, or you need to do to look after yourself? Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the NDIS replaced what we had, right, which was a set of services funded by each government via the Commonwealth, which took care of people, whether many of them were in group homes, many of them just required help in their own home, and
Hmm.
many of them would have been like early childhood interventions, etc. So all the same services, just a different delivery model.
Okay.
Then we went to the NDIS. So what's the job of the NDIS? It's still the same. It's to make sure that, and here's a real top heavy, what is the NDIS for? To make sure that a disability doesn't impede somebody's chance or right to live a good life, an ordinary life, as they say in the paperwork,
Hmm.
to ensure that human rights are met for people with a disability as well, to ensure economic and community participation. So that's the remit of the NDIS. Now, how it operationalizes that is very similar to the old way, but now we're for profit.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a question quickly? So the key difference that I'm hearing is profit, non-for-profit. Was that a strict requirement? Like only non-for-profits
In the
can
old
deliver
sector,
this? Yes.
I have to say, like, I wouldn't bet my life on this, but I have to say that I don't remember one single for-profit in the
Okay.
disability space at all. I might be wrong, but I did work, I had the list of all of the New South Wales tendered organisations. I do not remember one of them, not one of
Mm.
them being a for-profit. We were seeing at the same time in the sister sector, aged care, we were seeing for-profits coming in long before that. And how's that working for us? Well, you only have to look at the news, don't you? But I do not remember one for-profit in there. So job of the NDIS to make sure that these people who have an impairment or a disability, an impairment, are going to be looked after as any other person would be, to make sure that they can live an ordinary life. And they use that word intentionally, because it's not to make you have a fabulous life. It's not to make you have a less than life. It's to help you have an ordinary life like every other person would expect to have, and also be able to participate in economically in the world, and have a community participation in the world. So that's the
Yeah.
main remits of the NDIS.
That really sets the scene. And I'm glad we actually went way back in time to learn, because I
I
also
think you
didn't
have
know it.
to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah,
I don't even know a world without the NDIS. Like,
that's
I feel
right.
like it's been something around forever. I just know it as
No.
that. So,
No, it hasn't. And, whenever I do training, I never meant to do any of this. I never thought I'd be walking into the NDIS. It wasn't on my
yeah.
list of things to do. But when I do training, I start at the beginning. I'm not going to live in that. We're not living in the fact that it was, you know, not for profit and it was tendered services. I'm not living there. But you have to know that
Mm.
if you want to become a provider in today's market, if you want to know what's going on. And the other thing people need to learn is, I teach often about what we would call something like the construction associated with disability and aging. Like, most people come into this sector now and own a business and run a business, and they wouldn't know the constructions, the social construction around
Mm.
disability. It really matters. Everybody sees it differently.
Yeah.
100 people could give you a different idea of what they see disability is and how they would deal with it. One person will say, and if you remember, do you remember, she's passed away now, but she was a disability advocate. And I cannot remember her name. My memory is not what it was, let's just say. But she was always talking on TV, small woman in a wheelchair. I think she might have even been a lawyer, but she passed away, and she belonged to the social model of disability, which is what the NDIS sprouts. the social model of disability, which is it is only the environment that makes you have a disability, right? It is only the environment that means you're disabled. So if I have a wheelchair and I can't get in somewhere, it's the model. So the social model would say, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to keep advocating. I'm going to keep making everyone in the world and Australia and the councils, I'm going to make them change everything so I can get everywhere. That's the social model. Yeah. Then there's the medical model. And then there's different types of ways to look at it. And I really believe that, people in positions of power and like business owners, people in positions of power, such as quality managers or compliance managers, I don't believe that they should not know that. This is what we would have expected in a sector that we did expect when people had tenders. Who's on your board? Who's your employee? Who are all the people that are going to work? We had so much more education, people with education and people with experience in that old sector. Now we've got a free for all in this sector without that knowledge. Yeah.
And that brings me to the next part of the chat, which was all of these other people have loaded in. And with that comes a few issues, or a lot of issues, should we say, with compliance and actually providing that good service. So compliance structures are throughout everything. We've got it in the vet sector, we've got it in the health sector, we've got it in the disability sector. With your focus and experience, why are compliance structures with this sort of vulnerable sector of society so important?
Why are they so important? Why is compliance and quality so important? Because they are least able to fend for themselves. They are least able to be able to recognize in the first place when their human rights are being abused. And the outcomes of the breaching of those that I just listed can be dire. So that's why the more vulnerable the population, the stronger the compliance and quality framework should be.
Yeah. And what are some of the typical impacts that are occurring when compliance obligations aren't being met? Like, how does this actually manifest?
Such a range. So, and you can easily see this now, or you won't see the exact nature of it, which we're actually wanting to fight for, to be able to see the exact nature of providers' breaches in compliance. But you will be able to go to the banning orders list and see how many people are banned. But what we'll see is, at its worst at the moment, we had a case that changed the landscape of the compliance, which was Anne-Marie Smith, who was left not attended to properly. She was wheelchair bound, 24/7 care. Well, even if it wasn't 24/7 care, she certainly needed a lot of care because she couldn't do for herself. So she died basically. Here's your case in point. She died basically of, I think it was sepsis through the wounds from the pressure sores from not being moved around properly. So that's one thing. We do have other people who may die of because I've seen it, of a bowel obstruction. These are the worst outcomes. Yeah. But then there's everything in between that, which can go from really living quarters and the care of the living area being inadequate to, the use of what we would call restrictive practices, which is stopping somebody going somewhere or doing something. That's just one of them, one of the most common one used. So, that breaching of human rights from a level of 1 to 10, on a scale of 1 to 10, then there's the neglect, and then there's the abuse. And there has been some cases of abuse. And I'm talking about physical abuse, emotional abuse, coercive abuse, and also sexual misconduct. Believe it or not. So this whole range of things. So many people have died in the NDIS sector.
And obviously this is all stuff that's meant to be policed with compliance, and having good compliance policies and things in place, or providers following those things. They're there so that those things get they're designed to prevent them, but if they're not being done properly, these are the onset things. And I'm not shocked by any of those things I just heard if compliance isn't being met. But also one thing that came up for me too is, like, what sort of impact does that have on the workers? Because let's say an individual wants to provide these services, they're working for a provider or whatever. If compliance isn't being met on the provider's side, what impact does that have on the worker providing the service that might want to do a good job but might be none the wiser?
I'll tell you right now. Do you want to guess on a list of 1 to 10 where you think support work might come on one of the most dangerous industries and the one that gets the most workers' comp claims and injury?
By the way you've lined that up, I'm going to say an 11.
You reckon comes, so you're saying like there are 10 before it and support work
No,
comes on the list?
it's like off the scale dangerous. Like it's
Oh,
an
right.
11.
Okay, got it. Okay. So it is the second most dangerous occupation
Okay.
in Australia. Second only to what? Tell me what you think the second one might be, the one behind it. The one that isn't as dangerous as support work.
Is it surgery? Come on, that's dangerous.
Bricklaying.
What?
Yeah.
My
No, you'd
God.
expect bricklaying to be there. You'd expect
Right.
construction to be there. I'd
Mm-hmm.
expect number one to be building but it's not, it's support work. Now, the only reason that it's hit, I'm not saying that it wouldn't have been dangerous in the old sector, but it wouldn't have had the intensity of danger because of the lack of knowledge of providers, right?
Yeah.
Mostly because of the lack of knowledge of providers, but because of how many there are, how many providers, how many support workers there are,
Mm.
that's upped the numbers of workers' comp claims, etc. So I can't remember the exact figure, but obviously I developed some training, so I did do the research and get the stats from the appropriate places. The number of claims from people and then the number of psychosocial disabilities that would end up being lifelong as a result of working in the sector is very high. So much so that a change to the Work Health Safety Act was put in place to really drill down and point out if you're not doing X, Y, Z as a provider to try to prevent psychosocial harm to your workers. Now we will be able to penalise you. So that act change came in about a year ago.
And so really what I'm getting from it is the impact on the worker is not only like huge responsibility for what's going on here and they're administering the service, right? So if they're not getting it right and not even knowing that, that's doing them a disservice professionally, but also contributing to
Harm.
Okay, it's huge. From what you've seen on the front lines, where are NDIS providers struggling when it comes to good compliance? Is there particular areas that are difficult for them, or where is it all occurring?
Let me start with this because I can't take the trainer out of me. Let me start like this. When I took a look in just before COVID, it was late 2019. I got a job. They'd just written some new standards for the NDIS. I had nothing to do with the NDIS except for the fact that I'd worked 3 weeks with the NDIS Commission and it was horrible. Anyway, I got this job as an NDIS standards auditor because I know that stuff inside and out. I went to my first audit and here's what I found, and it didn't change from here. The provider, lovely provider, came from the old system. She said, there were lots and lots of questions at me as an auditor. And I said, eventually, after a couple of hours of that, I said, you know what? You're asking me so many good questions, but you know what I know? I know, because I read your policies, that the answers to those questions are all in those policies. And I said, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I don't think you read your policies, have you? And she said, no, well, nothing ever changed. Nothing's ever changed. Like 1 out of every 10 providers will know their responsibilities or will have read their policies. 1 out of 10. Now,
So
that's the answer. That's the answer. Like they don't know. If you don't know, how can you know?
would you say that it's become more of a checkbox thing where they go, I know I need to have the policy, but that doesn't mean I've got to read it. I'm just going to put it there. Is that sort of the attitude or the problem that's occurring, would you say?
I think that there are some very well-meaning providers.
Yes.
But I would have to say that maybe 20% are well-meaning and or good.
Yeah.
And about 80. And I think, that might be sort of morphing a little bit now. We might have 25% are good and 75 haven't got a clue. I think it's a combination of things. I don't think that every single provider goes out of their way to do harm. And I don't blame them for it. Who I blame, if blame is the appropriate word, who I hold responsible, it's that the NDIA and then the NDIS Commission, when that came into effect, who are the gatekeepers, the ones that let the providers in. It's them.
Right.
They did it. So if someone opened the gate for you and said you can do this and you went through, you can't really blame the provider, because if they got through that with all the lack of knowledge, skill and good intents that they had, how can we blame the provider? I'm not saying that they're not responsible, and I have these debates with colleagues. I'm not saying that the provider's not responsible. I'm saying somebody else preceded this, and that was the government.
It's a joint effort. Like, they both have to be responsible, right?
Absolutely. They both do. I can also say that it's not like we didn't think that this would happen. So when I left, just before I left Ageing, Disability and Home Care in New South Wales, we had a meeting to give us a briefing about the NDIS that was coming. And when I walked out of there, I said to my 3 colleagues who are still friends today, I said, I don't know, guys, like slap me if I'm wrong. But from what I took from that, the only thing that anyone is going to need at the end of the day, when all is said and done, the only thing they're going to need is an ABN. And they went, yep, that's what you heard. That's what I heard. It doesn't matter what they say, but we have a code of conduct. Oh, but we have, no, it doesn't matter. You've got people who don't know what they're doing. Of course, none of that makes any difference. And they didn't do their job. The Commission and the NDIA didn't do their job. So it's a perfect storm.
Ultimately, for the provider, what's at stake for them if they're in this boat where they've taken the opportunity, they've been approved by those governing bodies, they're now operating, they probably know that they should be a bit more familiar with their policy, or their policy's not up to scratch. What's going to happen to them, or what could happen to them if they're not on top of this?
Before I answer that, I'll tell you the other thing that you'll just love. You'll love this one. So at the moment, you can hold them like we can go, well, you didn't ask them enough questions. The audit wasn't hard enough. We're not asking for any real compliance. I'll tell you right now, the audit, the practice standards and the governance around auditing, that's why I left, didn't allow us to get rid of the ones we knew shouldn't be there, right? Simple as that. But here's the kicker. I might get the numbers slightly wrong. It really doesn't matter about the numbers, but out of, let's just say there's 20,000 registered providers, right? So they're the ones who the government knew about because they went through the audit process, right? The first audit. I want you to guess how many unregistered you think there are.
So hang on, how many providers are there in total?
I'm not going to tell you that, but I'm going to tell you that there's about 20,000-ish, and I'm probably wrong. It could be 15, it could be 26, doesn't matter. But, last time I looked, it was around, 20-something thousand.
I'm going to guess that 80% non-registered.
But you don't know. Well, okay. Yeah. All right. So there's about 250,000, maybe 3 at any given quarter. The NDIS is not real sure whether it's 200,000, 250,000 or 300,000.
That's crazy.
So do the math on that. What is that percentage? Like, what is, if you've got...
Gina, I'm not good at math.
Me neither. That's why I need Ali.
It's a lot.
Here right now.
It's a lot. Let's put it there.
But we know figures, don't we? Like, we know, okay, there's 200,000. Let's be conservative and say 200,000 instead of 250. 200,000 unregistered, maybe conservative again. We'll be generous and say 20,000. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So do you see the issue that
it's huge.
Find abhorrent? Anyone could see when I tell you that. Why do I find that so abhorrent? Well, that's so obvious. Like, I took a royal commission and a review for them to decide to make most people register. Now, that royal commission and the thing, I think it's a year and a half ago, coming up to 2 years, could be 2 years. So the mandatory registration for those 300,000, 200,000 has not started yet. And that review was not last Christmas. It's a year and a half ago. They don't act quickly.
And that was set for the sector to not make people register and actually be out there.
Well, I don't want to take away from the registered ones because there's a lot of registered ones doing harm.
Okay. Yes. Yep.
But there would be unregistered ones doing it as well. I don't want you to even think that the registered ones are necessarily good by being registered. Some of the unregistered are good. And I would send my family to them. It's more about the people running them, their knowledge, their intent, their experience. If I asked you to go and run a group therapy, how would you go?
I would not.
See, I've never found any of this other than anything other than logic. It's 2 + 2.
Yeah.
And I can't think of what kind of people were in the NDIA, because the NDIS commission didn't start till later. I can't think what kind of people could have decided that any of that is okay. And I actually think, here's what I think. I think there should be I don't know if it's a class action or not, but I think that there should be a lawsuit to make the government who did this pay for it. Now, where that money would go, I don't really know, but I know that they need to be made to account. for the decisions they made. Because you know what? It comes down to, if you're arguing duty of care, what would a reasonable person do, right? Duty of care is what would a reasonable person do. I'm just one person, and many of my colleagues with my experience agree with me. We all call that 2+2. We knew that was going to happen. So that's where I think that, they need to be held for account for what they've done.
Really, to go back to what's at stake for the providers not getting their stuff under control.
Get banned.
Banned? Is there other things that can happen to them personally, or?
Well, if they're a sole trader, they obviously can lose their personal assets. If they're a business, a proprietary limited company, they won't. But let's talk about also the psychological harm that is done, as we already know, and it dovetailed into the number of, the what number on the scale of most dangerous people, occupations there is. It's number 2 on that. So psychological harm that is done to the owner experiencing it, the support workers involved in it, the psychological harm done to probably the participant that is at the centre of it, the family of that participant. Imagine being Anne-Marie Smith's family. I think she's my age, was my age. Imagine being her family and knowing that sheer neglect ended your daughter's life. I mean, how do you enjoy the rest of your life after you know that's happened? So the harm to providers, the harm to the people working for the provider, and harm financially to the provider. Some of them are, if you have a look around, you'll see some fines. Some of those fines have been not high enough, but some of them are like a few million. I think they've said there's going to be a fine of 1.24 million now if providers do XYZ. I just have to ask why it took 13 or 14 years to get to that, because I don't think it's very hard. I don't think this is a hard thing to work out. I'm not a genius, and, love my friends and colleagues, but they're not geniuses either. We just saw it coming.
Yeah.
So bannings, loss of everything. But then you've got the providers too, I want to point out, who couldn't care less. They only ever came in to make money, and they will walk away without having a feeling in the world about it. And then the providers also who set up to do the wrong thing and be fraudulent. And they pretty much, it seems like a methodology. They come in, they make a lot of money, they don't pay their tax, they do it, they push it as far as it can go, and then they go into administration, and the taxpayer, all of us, we foot the bill for their $40 million in tax not paid. That's a methodology. This is a methodology. Yeah. So
very tangled.
So nothing about it's pretty.
You know what? The diamond in the rough is what you are doing and what you are trying to do and advocating for, which is really at the heart of the chat today. So let's move out of all of those chaotic issues and let's go to the solution. You've got effective policy up and running now to help make this compliance problem easier for NDIS providers and more streamlined. But what pushed you into business after working for all these organizations?
Okay. So my last role as a PAYG employee was at the was it the commission? Wasn't the commission, I think it was just the NDIS, in the quality management team, right? So National Quality Management Team. I was so shocked by the lack of knowledge in the quality management team. I was so shocked by the questions we were posing in our staff meetings about, well, let me put it this way, like the director of that quality management team, right, of the NDIA, right, had 2 years experience as a quality manager. Guess where?
Don't say a provider that was unregistered and had really bad policy or something.
Not even a provider. He'd never worked in the sector. Telstra.
You're kidding.
So our guru, right, the person that people like me and my colleagues that were very experienced in there as well, had a guy who was a director with 2 years experience in quality management at Telstra. Completely different angle. Completely
How
different.
did it even make sense to put him in that role?
I think that the NDIA makes sense in my eyes. They just don't have knowledge. They don't make smart decisions. So I was there, and once again there was a whole lot of perfume being worn, and I started to feel sick because I have a bit of a chemical issue. And I said, listen, I don't think I'm going to be able, like, I'm going to need people to stop wearing perfume in our pod. And she said, oh, why? Why should we stop wearing perfume? And I went, well, I didn't want to say this, but because it's actually a disability, like if you look in the Disability Act, you'll see that multiple chemical sensitivity is a disability and it affects about 17% of the population. She went, oh, that's just not true. Anyway, she came back and she said, you're right. And I went, well, I just thought, you know what? I'm just done with this. I'm just done. So that's when I got a job as doing the audit. And then when I saw that, because imagine when I had that first person and then they never got any different, I just thought, I can do this standing on my head. Like what I'm seeing from the consultants of the day, and there was about 3 in the sector at that time. A couple of them are good. But one of them, I had the pleasure to see their handiwork because they were registering an organisation that I was contracting to, not PAYG, just contracting to. And I thought, I don't understand why. No, actually, now I know why all of these people are probably not doing so well. They've just got these cookie cutter policies and stuff like that. And the young girl that I was talking to on the phone couldn't have been more than 20, and she was helping this organisation get registered. And I just thought, I just can't stand seeing all of this happening. So I just started working from home, just assisting one provider here, one provider there. I had no ambition to be a big business because I do have health issues. I had no ambition for any of that, but it just grew. And then I built my tools, the tools I've always used and stuff like that. But I just, quality managers, and in essence, apart from being a CEO or an allied health professional or etc., quality is what I love. It's kind of built in. And that's what I say, like compliance and quality are inseparable. They just, you can't separate them really, So quality managers fill gaps. And when I see something missing, I want to build something or do something to make it work. So yeah, I just started working after I saw that. It's really hard you can't look at it anymore, Thom, if you're not going to do anything about it. Like I'm not that person.
Do you know, that's actually what I really liked about you in our intro call was you were able to identify the issues, sure, but when I actually looked at what you were doing, you've gone the extra mile and you've gone, okay, I might hate this or I can see all these problems, but you know what? Here's a solution.
Damn well, can I fix them?
And do you know what? And you do it in the face of, even if people don't like you, calling a spade a spade. It doesn't even matter any of that other embellishment. The thing about it is that you saw the problem and you did something, which a bazillion people probably see the same thing and just don't.
A lot of them would just keep on selling their registration packages to the next one that comes along, whereas I find that almost impossible.
And it's that quality about you that I really like. And that's why I wanted to do this chat with you today, because you're very interesting to me.
Thank you.
Let's talk about what you actually provide on with effective policy. So what does it look like? And if an NDIS provider engages you, what are they getting? How are they working with you?
Gosh, it's so different. So because I saw years and years of degrading of the vet sector courses, I knew that there was a problem with the qualifications that people had. So I knew that knowledge was a problem. So I started developing training to replace some of the poor vet sector certificates that people would have. They didn't have the knowledge. So I started developing that and the policies and the compliance tools and things like that. So people will come to get registered. And I honestly did work myself into the ground, just helping people get registered, because I'm not the person that can go, here you go. Oh, that's fine. Don't worry that you don't know that. Like we worked really hard helping people have knowledge, and the auditors would say, when our clients would come to them, they would be well prepared. And that's a compliment. Even though I knew they didn't know what they were doing, some of them, they would be well prepared. And so we would help them with registration, which I don't do very much anymore. We do internal audits because they come to us and go, oh, something's broken, we don't know what, or, so we do an internal audit. And that's the best learning value any provider or business can have, is to have an internal audit. So training, internal auditing, consulting, just someone to ask those questions they don't understand, making tools that will help other people fix their issues. What else do we do? There was this one big thing that people didn't understand: compliance. They didn't understand quality and they didn't understand compliance. I'd always used an Excel spreadsheet. So what I said about doing was taking an old one from aged care that I used to use and building it out for NDIS providers. What I wanted to do and what I've always wanted to do, and I'd just done it like the year before for another organization, you want everything in one place. You need to see what's going on in your organization from a quality and compliance perspective, like you're looking down from a helicopter on everything. And that's what this tool does. So for years and years and years, that's like the best thing I ever made, that Excel spreadsheet, and everybody loves it. And then we've now turned that into a software.
So we've taken it from the spreadsheet that helps providers keep really organized. We've turned it into a software, and now providers can do.
Well, look, all I ever wanted it to be was the Excel spreadsheet on steroids, and I always knew that people would go, oh, you've got a software. Oh, does it do billing? Does it do this? And it's like, no, think of my Excel spreadsheet. Now think about that on steroids. It's there to automate things and stuff like that. And so we are going to take it to the entire level. We are going to take it to doing everything that every other software does. But at the moment, it's a blind spot catcher. And that's what my Excel spreadsheet is, a blind spot catcher. But it's a blind spot catcher on steroids. So it sends you reminders. It sends other people reminders, all of those things. So even if I left it at that, it still covers blind spots that there isn't one other software on the market that does. So it works well with them. So it's not like you have that one and then there's no point in having mine. No, you can have every other one. You can have every other software because this one is still essentially at its core my Excel spreadsheet on steroids. I guess in essence, Tom, what I understood was just accept the fact that there's going to be 80% of people who don't know what they're doing. There's going to be 80% of people who don't know quality standards. They don't know these quality standards and they don't understand what's going on and what's required. So build a system that if they follow each register, that they will be keeping quality and compliance if they follow it. Yeah.
Yes. And for those people that really want to do a good job, something like this is almost like having a buddy or a pal to help you stay in sync with what the obligations are. That's what I'm getting from the tool.
They love it. I mean, I've never had you'd think I was a movie star because sometimes, and I'm not, but people go, oh my God, I saw that video. My God. Oh my God. It was the best thing I've ever seen, for years. And it's like, wow, they really do. It speaks to them. They get it. And it's a learning tool,
So, and this one's labeled as the Learn Easy and Smart Compliance. That's the software. Is that right?
No, that software that uses my Excel, that's just called Smart Compliance.
Smart Compliance. Okay.
Learn Easy is my learning platform.
Okay. That's the next bit I wanted to get into. So Learn Easy, how does that look in practice with an NDIS provider?
Okay, so I was the first in the market. There wasn't anyone else doing it, and I did it with a PowerPoint. And the reason being is all they had to do was prove to me that they knew something, and nobody could prove to me that they knew something. And the way to prove it to someone that you know something is to have a training certificate and be able to show, this is the course my staff did. So it started from a humble PowerPoint that people would access via my Dropbox. And then I eventually moved everything onto a platform about 4 years ago. And now we've just gotten bigger and bigger and we've got more subscribers. And I still only have a small portion of the market. You know what? From a holistic point of view, there's plenty of training platforms out there. So that has been fabulous to see. That it's really important because the lack of knowledge and even the lack of knowledge in the face of having something that says you've got a diploma in disability it is one of the root causes of the issues. It's the root cause.
So would a provider employ you for the services to provide the LMS and the training specific to
their
what
service
they need? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Specific to their service, yeah.
And they can use it as a tool to hold their employees accountable to make sure that they're staying up to date with industry knowledge and being on top of things?
Absolutely. If done correctly, and that's what I run a lot of events, like webinars, just 1 hour. Everyone can keep their attention for an hour where I might go through training needs analysis because everybody might start using a training platform. But what I also want them to understand is we don't just throw courses at people. What does that person need to know?
Yeah.
Fill out a form. It's called a training needs analysis. Who are they looking after? What did they come to you with? Some knowledge, no knowledge. Now, write a plan here about what that person needs and then do it again in a year and then the next year. Or every time you do a change to their position, do it and look at the training needs analysis for what does this person need. One of the things, apart from the harm that
Mm.
is caused through not knowing that stuff, when I would have people come and they'd want consulting because everything was going wrong, and they'd say that person's just not doing their job. And I listen and I listen and I listen. And what do you think the first thing I say to them is? Like when they say they're just not doing their job.
I would be asking the employer if they're doing their job in making sure their staff are trained.
Yeah, well, you're spot on. I would say to them, first of all, can I have a look at their position description? And then they'd either say they don't have one, and I'd go, well,
You're kidding.
you don't have to pay me for that. Or they'd go, here it is, and it would be wrong. And then the next question would always be to what you just said. What are their skills? What are they trained in? What do they know? Well, that doesn't matter. They're supposed to do what they're asked. No. You've just, they just set themselves up for that. So these all sort of tie in together. But I think one of the most beautiful things that I saw was, because I've been on the bandwagon of the sham certificates that people have been doing, and there's, it's logical to understand that people don't know what they're doing when the certificate that they've been awarded has been given to them without doing the work from an RTO. And what I saw on LinkedIn, or one of my colleagues sent it to me, was 30,000 qualifications have been revoked from students and lots of RTOs shut down. And
Wow.
that keeps us going. Me and colleagues, when we hear that, it's like, yay, I'll keep on complaining. I'll keep on sending things into the fraud fusion task force, because it told me that all the things that I'd been thinking and all the things that we'd been doing were not actually in vain. It just took a long time for them to come. Yeah.
The LMS, is that product only geared towards NDIS providers, or can individuals that are, looking to upskill or, do stuff on their own merit, is it appealing for them?
Absolutely. So you don't have to have a subscription to access our learning management system. We have a lot of people who buy one-offs. Like, for example, people want to get into the disability sector. So we have the new support worker package. So it's everything that I think a new support worker should know.
Sure. And this is all based on your experience?
Absolutely. There are things that even before the LMS, even before the NDIS sort of said what their mandatories were, I have a second list, what I think mandatory knowledge is. And it depends on what their experience is, because it's not always the same. So there's new worker and then existing worker. So we have packages and we divvy it up too. So an individual might just want to, because we get lots of individual purchases, heaps. People might want to upskill or understand behaviour support, and they can buy a behaviour support package. People might want to understand high intensity care. They can buy that. They might just want to know about epilepsy or dementia, so they can either buy a package or they can buy one at a time.
It's actually, it's quite a dynamic product. It can serve two purposes: organizations and individuals who genuinely want to do a good job in this space. That's another thing I really liked about what you're offering.
It's made a really big difference, and I'm glad that everybody else, all the others that are providing learning management systems, I'm glad there are lots. And, it's nice to see something working and making a difference,
Yeah, I agree. And with your learning resources, so what makes them different to other stuff that's out there, or ones that are claiming to offer the same outcomes?
I know this about myself, but I've also heard it said that sometimes people don't say the negative, and I will say the negative.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just want to go, now we'll move on to page 3 and everything's bright and cheery. I will say how it is. Like, this is what you're going to see, and here's what I want you to do when you see that. So that's not something that you can get from anyone other than the person that has worked there. So a lot of the time in LMS, you have instructional designers. They don't have any particular experience anywhere, but they take a resource and they build it. That's great. But I like to pop in my own little pearls of wisdom. And Ali will do the same on some of her subject matter expertise, because you got to hear the reality of it. And I think what you'll see in mine is the reality is flavored throughout them. And it does often mean that, Yeah, I've got no reason to just want it to be all rosy. So I tell it as it is, rather than just interpret a resource. Yeah.
I think that objective view on things, particularly with stuff like this, not knowing the truth actually hurts you more. And it's just so much easier when people know the truth or like, no, this is that. They can actually make a decision to do a better job because they know it's very defined. When it's grey and sugar coated and fluffy, it's very hard to know whether you're doing a good job. So that's another thing I really liked about your style. It's like, I'm not here to be just the good guy. I mean, you are the good guy, but
Yeah, but I can't lie
just
and
because
I can't
exactly.
yeah, and if I see wrong, I'm gonna call it out. And if someone says, um, you do this and then you pick up that and then you push this in there and everything's sweet. Well, I'll say, well, you do this and then you do that, but it might fall out. So what I want you to do when that, you know what I mean? Like that's the difference
Yes.
is that I go to each worst case scenario sometimes, but that's what helps me. And I'm only looking back at what I learnt through and trying to help people not have to repeat some mistakes I might have made.
And when it comes to compliance as well, because things can change and undulate, are
Mm.
you're in the industry now, so you're updating your resources as those changes come in?
Absolutely. So, from a policy perspective, policies and tools, we send updates out every quarter to people who have purchased our policies, regardless of whether there's a legislative update, because we'll have like practice updates.
Mhm.
And if there's an urgent legislative update, we will send that out. And when there's a change to legislation, our training will be amended to reflect that as well.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, and just to wrap up, what's one solid piece of advice that you would give to someone working in the NDIS sector that is subject to compliance?
If you don't have any experience and you've been, what's the word when you're promoted? If you've been promoted from a support worker into compliance or you've been hired and you don't have any experience, get the experience or get a supervisor that you see once a month to learn and mentor from. Because what I see enormously is people, Jack, Jane, or whatever, they'll either put their relative in as the compliance person or they'll promote a support worker. Number one, it isn't going to end well. Number two, it's not fair on the person that doesn't have the experience. And number three, don't hire the thing that's closest to you. You have to put an ad out. You have to get the best hire. If you're not willing to pay for it, you're going to pay for it down the other end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
solid. For anyone listening that wants to touch base with you after this, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can go onto our website and message us, or you can go to our YouTube channel, which is Effective Policy, and message us there, or you can pick up the phone and call us. And our phone number is really easy to see on our what do you call it? Webpage. Yeah,
Awesome.
we'd love to hear from people. Yeah,
I'll leave links to all of that in the show notes as well. So
thanks, Tom.
yeah, that's it. That wraps up our chat. Thank you so much for coming and doing this. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a lovely day.
Thanks, Tom. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.